Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Captain Shaq here, and welcome back to the Meta Campaign, the mass multiplayer cooperative war game where every unit on the board, at least for the ARMCO side, is run by players. Right? This is a custom rule set that we've been working on and busting out so that we can have this big cooperative campaign, something that we've always wanted, right? Telling stories, making custom units, and figuring out how it's all gonna work. We're on our third campaign with 350 players, and this is the third week of that campaign. And every week, I focus on a different battle group. If you don't know what that is, battle groups are how we've separated all the players so that we can kind of keep them organized and give them a little bit more personality, right? Today, we're gonna be focusing on Icarus and their Northwest battle on the two fronts, because Icarus is a weird one. They split right away, and that was always their plan. Now, I remember when we were planning out and we were seeing everybody discussing what the drop plan was gonna be. The vote had come in, we're not gonna have any intelligence on the drop when we hit planetfall, but the enemy won't know we're coming. So we can't really plan on what we're gonna do based on what the enemy has. We can only kind of just look at the terrain map, which was a scan provided by one of the other nations, and figure out, well, this is probably the best bet, let's do this. Now, 350 players is a lot, so we broke up into battle groups, each one with a TACCOM, which is someone who organizes all of the player intentions into a map that sends them to me so that I can work out how it all turns out, right? What they want to do ends up on the map that the TACCOM provided me, and then I figure out, already know where the enemies are and what the enemies are doing, and then wherever those two forces meet, that's where a battle happens. And Icarus was the only group that decided that they were going to land at 4 separate LZs all connecting each other, so in like a square. I'll put the TACCOM map on here. And then they were gonna separate between the northern group and the southern group. And that's exactly what they did. So let's talk about the northern group first. What happened? Well, when they landed, they came into contact with enemy infantry. Now, it was a surprise. That surprise meant that the enemy didn't have a chance to man the 3 artillery pieces or bring online what later, I think it was Holy Divers, it might have been Boars, found 2 of those autocannon quad-barreled AA turrets. Now, we've had some pretty bad luck with these things. Poor group to the northeast, I think it was Tornado, Typhoon, and Hurricane, they lost 2 hats in the initial invasion to these turrets. But finding 2 of them unmanned and undamaged means they could be captured, which is gonna come back a little bit later. Along with this fight, the way that they dropped in is they used a lot of VTOLs. VTOLs like Dustoff and Silver and Crow, right? These are the small VTOLs. And heavy VTOLs like White Wing and Junkers deploying vehicles. Vehicles like, well, one, Iron Rain, which is an heavy artillery unit, and Tigers, a main battle tank. We also had another light mech, Ted, dropped into the south, and we had Gone Again, one of our light mechs in the north, dropped in. And that's where the battle was. So in the north, our infantry pushed forward and found a bunch of industrial buildings they managed to dive into. Buildings do give a bonus, and they knew the buildings were there, so they had their orders for assault. You notice that everybody's name here is yellow, meaning they're pushing forward, they're assaulting. What that mechanically does is it splits damage between how far they can push an enemy back and then how much damage they do. It gets split down the middle. This meant that the enemy infantry who were in those structures and gaining defense bonuses by the next round were pushed out into a field or into kind of like a shanty area, meaning they didn't have much in the way of defense, while friendlies got to hold on to the buildings and had tons of defense. The fire support between the VTOLs, which the light VTOLs have a chin gun. They don't do a lot of damage, but they do a little bit. It's like a D2, so basically a coin flip, either a 1 or a 2 on damage. But then you had all the infantry, Holy Divers, Boars, Royal Jags, and our medics, CC. Royal Jags gets so creamed in this story. Keep an eye on them. And Boars gets a lot of work done as an engineer. And poor Gone Again ended up taking some damage. Somebody rolled, I think, pretty high, and they ended up getting whacked right in the first round. Now, the way that vehicles work is they have a number of hits. Doesn't matter what they roll, as long as an enemy rolls high enough to overcome the vehicle's armor, that's considered a hit. Certain vehicles have a certain number of hits that they can take. If a vehicle gets attacked and the roll ends up being a 5 or a 6, most rolls are at most like a D6, like an infantry unit can roll a D6, then that means that they either got turreted, meaning the turret doesn't work until it's repaired, or it's tracked. Gone Again just got hit. They didn't roll high enough to leg them, because they are a walker, right? So they're not gonna get tracked, they're gonna have tracks, but they ended up getting hit, they got 1 red. Concrete Pete, who landed in the north, also ran over and set up a bridge so that people could cross over and get to the VTOL facility a lot easier. And the VTOL facility was a discovery. Nobody knew what that structure was until our forces landed on it, saw the large hangars, and saw that, well, there's a lot of landing pads over here. This is obviously a maintenance facility for vertical takeoff and landing craft. That's what VTOL stands for. Another thing that we found was poor Pig, which was flying air cover for the region, he was flying it on his own, ended up dogfighting 2 fighters. Lucky for Pig, who has a force strength of 6, think of that kind of like health, but also related to how much damage they could do. They have a force strength of 6. They only rolled a 3, so they didn't do a lot of damage, 3 damage when they were attacking, but they got attacked by 2 other fighters. Luckily, the fighters only rolled a 3 and a 2, meaning that that's 5 damage total. Pig is left alive with 1 FS left. They did manage to survive, but just barely. That could have been terrible. Always good to fly with a wingman, because damage for fighters is separated. It's gathered together and then separated between how many fighters you have, which we might be tweaking that rule by the next version. So that's our situation at the end of round 1, and kind of how it maintains for round 2. They continue to fight the infantry there and then the VTOL facilities. So let's talk about, with the end of round 1 up north, we're set up in the buildings. We've got multiple bridges built. Oilskins is run up at the end of round 1 and found a minefield the hard way, so they got hit with 2 damage, and which is taking a hit. Light vehicles, by the way, can only take 2 hits before they explode. Whereas main battle tanks can take 3, to give you an idea of the mechanics. Now, down in the south, the other part of Icarus, remember they split north and south. Icarus Group South assaulted heading south towards the stronghold, but only to a few buildings that they had seen on the scan, right, the map. They ended up running into a convoy who was on their way into the Citadel. 2 squads of infantry, 6 and 6, on the back of 2 trucks, who immediately unloaded and engaged the invading force, and what we're calling old walkers. They're just not as fast. They have the same stats, they're just not as fast as our light mechs. That fight went on because the enemy infantry were out in the open, and because our friendly forces rolled so well, they ended up wiping both squads and destroying the walker, while only Tigers took damage and the other walker fled. Remember, the enemy was our friendlies were on assault, so that damage was split, and the enemy was pushed back. And in this, it was represented as them fleeing around the wall to get away. The other old walker was not damaged. The other thing that fled was an AA turret, which actually rolled really, really well and ended up damaging, I'm fairly certain, one of our air transports this round. I think I don't remember which one it was. It was somebody. Somebody took a whack. It was Seraphs. That's why they were so far north. They're 3 FS and pushed back. Now, the other scary thing here is that we found 2 enemy heavy air infantry transports as VTOLs. Now, our intelligence group on ARMCO found out that these things can carry a total of 2 squads of infantry, something our VTOLs can't do. These helicopters, and they kind of look like Chinooks, right? Kind of get that idea, that's what they are. These are packed with infantry, and nobody knew exactly where they were going to land for the next round. Of course, they landed almost immediately so they could engage the enemy forces. Now, Seraphs did their damnedest to stop this. Here is the map for round 2. This is the end of the map. Actually, this is the conflict map, right? So this isn't where the battle took place. It just tells us where the conflicts are for me to resolve as a GM. And what we found here, Seraphs did his damnedest to stop one of those transports, those helicopters, from landing, because they knew this was going to be a problem. And Iron Rain is completely exposed. He does have some sandbags put in by bone pickers. He used up one of his supplies as an engineer. They each get 2 to repair Tigers and to build sandbags. But sadly, Seraph only rolled, I want to say they only rolled like a 3 on combat. And Concrete Pete, if we go over to the end of round 2 and we see how it all turned out, oh man, Concrete Pete in the north pulled out that autocannon, this is an engineer, and turned it on. And sadly, if it would have rolled just anything but a freaking 1, it would have done so much more. It rolled a 1 though, and it fired at that air helicopter. The fighter Seraph only rolled a 3, so they did a total of 4 damage. Those helicopters have a health of 6, so it wasn't enough, and all the infantry managed to land. So it's interesting how the dice can really play a role in how a battle plays out. Like, you can make your best bets, but at the end of the day, combat is chaos, and who knows what could actually happen. You can only just kind of hedge your bets. Make sure you have more friendlies than there are enemies nearby. Make sure you have the right tools for the job, work together, that kind of thing. It's the only way you can really push things in your direction. This fight, though, looking at the south, was brutal at the end of turn 2. Squires rolled really well, did a lot of damage to the enemy, but also took a ton of casualties, right? Poor Tigers got immobilized and took a hit with Bone Pickers repairing them. That's actually from one of the anti-tank cannons from the Citadel itself firing, and it rolled pretty high. Luckily for them, Rabbit came rushing in from the south with 4 light vehicles, Roses, Aquila, Puma, and Ember, driving fast up there and rolling a 4, a 1, a 3, and a 3 on their attacks, destroying both helicopters and doing a lot of damage to the infantry. And I have a list of how we work through what targets what. We actually have adjusted this as this campaign has gone because it is a test campaign. We're learning, we're solidifying the rule set as we go. And poor Iron Rain, because there was just nothing there to really support. And I mean, who could have guessed that those 2 transports would have been in that square when we landed? Nobody knew. Iron Rain was destroyed. That the unit was lost to us. So Kelly's and Squire almost died, barely made it through. And the ammunition for Seraphs, the air cover has been used. Now they've got to go back to an airfield and get repairs. Down in the southern group that was pushing up towards those buildings, they decided to hold position for an entire round. Meaning, as infantry, they have a special mechanic where if they hold position and don't move on the subsequent turn, they set up fighting positions, they dig in, they get a really heavy defense bonus that stacks with any structures that might be there. So that's a +3 defense bonus just because they're infantry holding, and they get a bonus for being in buildings, right? Now, the enemy has done something similar. They've gone up on the walls, they've held position for a full turn, and they get a defense bonus. And what this ended up meaning is even with air support, and the way that air support works is if there's no air targets to fire at, fighters could offer close air support, giving a +2 to damage to any infantry that are fighting, that are rolling, right? And that's exactly what happened here. But even with that, they couldn't get over the infantry defense. So imagine you've got, these industrial buildings on one side, the fortress wall on the other, and these infantry just pecking at each other with machine gun and rifle fire. But nobody can really do any real damage, right? Nothing is breaking through the defenses. Except Tigers, who I want to say every round they rolled hit their target and either killed it or badly damaged it. Tigers was mobile and still firing off AP rounds. With that main battle tank in the back and rolling like better than a 4 every round. I want to say they actually killed multiple turrets and multiple vehicles. They definitely killed the Walker, and then they killed the AP. They exchanged a shot with the anti-tank turret up on the walls. The enemy turret hit them, tracked them, they fired and just killed the thing. It was great. So you've got this kind of stalemate at the south side of Icarus. You've got tons of casualties. Oilskin has returned from his minefield-like discovery and has rushed back south, ended up meeting up with the engineer's path and getting some repairs. Same with Gone Again, ended up getting repairs from Bastion, another group of engineers. We got a lot of engineers in the north. Concrete Pete winding up that anti-air cannon, which by the way, those are automated, so once they're on, they're just on. They can do a max of 3 damage. They're always in assault mode, but they're pretty sweet and they're a nice bit of loot. Now, the real chaos comes from Crow, the VTOL, picking up an infantry group Royal Jags from the buildings next to those abandoned artillery pieces. They ended up deciding that they're gonna go find out what's in that VTOL facility. So they load up in a transport, the Crow transport. The Crow player flies them in, lands them. They assault, not knowing that a very large enemy force is coming in behind them. So they end up getting attacked by 2 full squads of infantry, plus the guys currently holding the VTOL facility. And they get sandwiched in between all this fire. And even doing all of that, they managed to do some pretty decent damage. They rolled a 6, so they basically wiped an enemy infantry off the board, spreading damage to everybody and getting inside the facility, but with only 1 actionable unit left. FS, Force Strength, 1 squad less. Now that means with 1 FS left, they're on the edge of being wiped out, and the Royal Jags will no longer be a unit in the field, right? The player won't be able to play anymore until our next campaign. It also means that if they do any combat rolls, they can only roll a 1. They can only do 1 damage. Not great. They need reinforcements desperately. And since they're constantly in a firefight, we still haven't had a chance to do an inventory to find out what's in that VTOL facility, which really sucks. More off-putting, though, is what the enemy's doing. And I know a lot of players talked about this. They secured the bridge to the west. with infantry. They push 2 squads. It looks like they're going to run across the bridge. They set up artillery and they started shelling. They're doing bombardments, meaning that they're bringing down the friendly defenses. Not that it really mattered. There weren't enough friendly enemies alive to really take advantage of the bombardment. But they're defending that bridge. They're not really pushing forward as hard as they could. They could send all 4 squads. And that means, if we scroll over to the west, enemy reinforcements are flooding in. And we confirmed this later. The enemy is on their way back. Yos, the dictator, knows that his time is going to be up if ARMCO breaks through to the Citadel. He's got to pull his forces back from the invasion of his neighbor. He was trying to call dibs on some beachfront property to the west, and now he's panicking and he's pulling everybody back. And the players are aware of this. So it's pretty interesting. So let's look at, this is round 3 video. Let's look at round 3. We'll start in the north for Icarus. This is the story of Icarus. Icarus has, with the engineers' help, dug in, set up sandbags, started calling in defensive fire from a new artillery piece that's been flown in, Cornfield. What a name for an artillery piece. Cornfield was flown in and deployed by a VTOL. They set up their gun and they started firing off the supplies that they have. And they don't have a lot of supply. They can only fire once before they need to be resupplied by a Logi player. But they fired off, giving an entire grid square of debuffs to enemy defenses. At the same time, the light mechs Ted and Gone Again and Neptune fire support to try to help get Jags out of there and to take the VTOL facility. The enemy infantry, the 2 squads, pushed forward across the field and ended up taking a bit of damage, but doing a lot more in return. They rolled a 5 and a 1, meaning Ted actually had their light laser cannon knocked out, meaning their weapon system doesn't work. A 5 means weapon system, your turret is broken, or your main weapon is out as a vehicle, and they took a hit, because a 5 is enough to go over the armor. So now Ted is 1 hit away from being dead. Gone Again does take 1 shot from infantry with 1 damage roll, but it's not enough to get over the light. What do they have, armor of 1, I want to say? It's not much, but it's enough. It matters. Pinging off the armor, they didn't take any damage. Neptune managed to kill the enemy light vehicle was there. Boars, the infantry squads that are in the area, managed to put enough fire down to kill the other infantry squad that was next to the VTOL facility, wiped them completely. And Crow chases after the remaining infantry heading off to the north and wipes them. So now they're gone, and we have secured that northern industrial center. But the enemy still set up the bridges, and we haven't really secured the VTOL facility. We still don't know what's inside it. Down in the south, Rabbit has had enough. They've rushed up here in force. Roses, Puma, Ember, Aquila all go for a flanking attack against the infantry that is set up. BT and Sin Eater, the light vehicles from Rabbit, start putting down fire with their laser cannons, with Sin Eater rolling really well. Forge is rushed up here with bombers to offer support, but they didn't drop any. They've still got the green marker, meaning they still got ammo at the end of round 3. And thankfully, Kelly's manages to get evacuated, and Teal, one of our medics, starts healing them up. Dex hangs out for a bit and starts building up more defenses, trying to drag it. I remember their RP for Dex was like dragging Wounded to this small windmill. Yeah, in the mid round, it was a big windmill that they were dragging Wounded over to, and the rest of the light vehicles were on their way up. Now, light vehicles have heavy machine guns. They have a range of 2, which is really good. They just only roll a D4 when they attack. But all of our light vehicles skirmishing up north, putting down fire to help finish off whatever infantry remained. They did quite a good job. The firefight in the south for Icarus, by the way, still going on. Nobody's being able to really do any damage. They're just kind of firing back and forth. Bone Pickers manages to repair Tigers all the way, and Tigers once again rolled a 5. Another round takes out another turret, and it's one of the anti-infantry turrets on the Citadel wall, which only have a range of 1, so they can't really reach out to fire back. That was only the anti-tank weapon. So it's getting pretty spicy over here for Icarus. Now, we've got more air cover coming in with Blue Jays and Black Widow offering support, and they've got their own artillery fighting. So, with the medic CCs trying to heal up Jags and poor Squire, who've been beaten up, all emergency evac'd, by the way, by VTOLs, which was wonderful. It was intense. Icarus still holds, and I'll give you a little spoiler as we get farther into the campaign. We are now at round 5. We have captured Yos, and we're going to tell that story in the next one on what the other battle groups are. Specifically, we're going to tell the story of Hammer and Pegasus and Atlas. But we're going to do that in the next episode, not this one, because that one is the breaching of the wall. And we still got to talk about our skirmish force that's been pushing in the west, or in the east side, on the east side, which has been pretty fun. There's a wonderful moment with Templar I can't wait to talk about, and diving in and saving engineers and medics right when they're needed. But and I think it's not even the first campaign that they've done that, but it's been such a blast. Thank you all for joining me for this. 350 players in a tabletop war game is just awesome. And I do have one announcement. We've got some really talented people who have volunteered to do some work on things we need, like art assets. And we've got a Cheese working on what's called SAM now, which is the bot that's going to be used to help track our upgrade system. So I don't have to manually do it anymore, to keep track of like how you can spend your resources like bonus pay and rec, so you can get upgrades and unit customization. So all that stuff is in the works. But if you guys are really interested in this and want to jump in, maybe you've got some cool pixel art style you want to throw our way, pop on over to the ARMCO Discord. Show me what you've got. Can you add something cool to this? It is our neat community campaign after all. I don't need to be the only one working on it. So come on over, check it out. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a good time, and I hope you've been enjoying this as much as I have. I will see you all next time. Later, everybody.